Grab a premium aluminum dial and give it a turn. You immediately feel the cold material and heavy, deliberate resistance pushing back against your fingers. Or lift the lid off a luxury smartphone box. It doesn't just fall open. It takes exactly 3 seconds to slide apart, held in suspension by a precisely engineered pocket of air. We live in an era dominated by software, which trains us to think of these sensory details as finishing touches, a coat of polish applied by engineers right before a product ships. But physical design works under a strictly different reality. You cannot retrofit simplicity into a messy object, and you cannot fix physical character with a firmware update. Look at this timeline charting design debt. It maps the 1-10-100 rule. Fixing a flaw in the concept phase costs $1. Delay that decision until after the product is released, and that dollar compounds into a $100 penalty. Perceived quality is a physical property. It has to be engineered and locked in on day one. You can see this discipline by peeling an object backward from its surface down to its core. Inside car cabins, flat touchscreens are slowly giving way to tactile physical buttons again, because drivers need to operate them by feel, without looking. On the outside, electric powertrains completely erased the mechanical need for a massive engine grille to pull in air, stripping away a century of familiar automotive styling. Without that grille, brands now have to prove who they are in the dark, relying on minimalist 2-line light signatures. Strip away those headlights and you get down to the bare stance. Long before a designer draws a curve, they have to decide exactly where the wheels are placed. That single choice dictates the entire physical proportion of the machine. This diagram outlines what industrial designers and high fashion houses both call the shadow test. You black out the shape to isolate the raw perimeter. If you can still recognize the product and the brand, the geometry works. If the silhouette fails the shadow test during the concept phase, no amount of decorative styling added downstream will save the object. The math gets significantly harder when you have to design objects that have zero historical precedent. Take the eVTOL air taxi. There is no canonical shape to copy from helicopters or drones, and it carries a heavy psychological constraint. The physical form alone has to convince a nervous stranger that it is safe enough to leave the ground. We see a similar problem at a much smaller scale with the new wave of AI companion devices. They possess deep artificial intelligence, but intentionally lack touchscreens or human faces. Giving a faceless object a personality is purely a character design problem. You only have 2 tools to express it: the static physical form and how the object moves. When you design novel tech, the concept phase becomes a philosophical exercise. You have to decide exactly what the object will definitively refuse to be. Inside the modern studio, generative AI and real-time rendering have collapsed the financial cost of producing these early concepts to near zero. This flowchart highlights the danger of that speed. Instant, high-fidelity rendering flatters weak ideas, trapping design teams in a closed loop of endless, surface-level iteration. Technology eliminated the friction between an idea and an image, but the gap to human judgment remains entirely analog. That human judgment carries a massive financial weight. 70 to 80% of a product's final manufacturing cost is permanently committed before the design ever leaves this initial room. Human taste, applied early and decisively, is the only true variable that actually gives an object its soul. Modern rendering power must be used to rigorously judge the feeling of a thing before physical reality sets in, not just to iterate forever. Physical design decisions are as cheap as a sketch on day one, but they are brutal once the tooling is cut. So make sure you see every angle before you build. Explore your next concept with Depix.